Genetically modified crops are useful in many ways for third world countries. Professor Dr. Kwan of the International Food and Economics and Rural Development says that genetically modified crops can contribute significantly to global food security and poverty reduction. One way that they are beneficial is that they produce a high yield. Genetically modified crops are resistant to pests and insects in some varieties. This helps to produce a high yield because non-genetically modified crops could be eaten by bugs and they have to be sprayed with harsh chemicals. But genetically modified crops already have that resistance in them, so therefore they keep bugs off of them and they can produce a higher yield. And a high yield are vital for poverty improvement. Secondly, genetically modified crops would boost third world economies. It creates opportunity for money. So genetically modified crops produce a high yield, which in turn produces a high profit, which would allow the farmer to buy other things and hire people, which would help the economy. Secondly, genetically modified crops lower heavy chemical exposure. For an example, in China, rice and cotton are maintained by heavy chemicals. And the use of heavy chemicals is bad for the environment and also is bad for the workers' health because most third world countries don't wear protective gear when using harsh chemicals, and that can be toxic to their health. And genetically modified crops lowers that because it already contains that in the seed, and it would save them money on that they would have to spend on chemicals, and it would also improve the workers' health, and it would protect the environment because we wouldn't be putting harsh chemicals into the ground that would possibly seep into the water system. For other examples, South Africa and India, they don't really have as much pest problem, so they benefit more from the high yield that the genetically modified crop produces. Professor Breyer studies cell biology and says that micronutrient malnutrition is a continuing and serious public health problem in many countries. So another aspect is that researchers developed this rice called golden rice, which is a genetically modified rice, which contains vitamin A. And vitamin A is a deficiency widely spread throughout the tropics. So with this research, they have proven to put vitamin A into this rice, which would help with malnutrition, even though there's substitutes food for malnutrition which are already out and successful, but they're not economically stable because the country has to keep buying in these malnutrition and these nutrition products, when they could buy this rice and they could buy the seeds and produce it themselves, which would help their own economy. So with all this research, they're coming up with new forms that can help through genetically modified foods. Professor Dr. Kwan of the International Food and Economics and Rural Development says that in spite of these encouraging examples, more public support is needed in biotechnology development to ensure that other promising technologies for the poor are being developed, and into technology delivery to ensure that these are widely accessible. Finally, with all these genetically modified improvements, they could help benefit third world economies. Thank you.
Right. It sounds like your opening sentence is the proposition, so there's not really any attention device, but it's not clear that that's the proposition and that it needs to be highlighted a little bit more so it's more explicit that this is the issue that's going on. I don't know why this is a controversy. It sounds like a general description of what genetically modified foods are supposed to be able to accomplish. Does anybody challenge that they're able to accomplish those things? Is that what's in dispute about genetically modified organisms? I think you need a little bit more background context for us so that we can see what the argument is on this particular point. You do kind of have a preview that just kind of suggests a variety of benefits, but they're not really listed distinctly. You don't really have declarative sentences for them. When you get to them in the body of the speech, it feels like you are spinning around 2 or 3 times on the same issue, and sometimes you come back to the issue. So there's inconsistency there. When there was numbering, I got 2 number 2s in a row, and that was a little unclear. So I got an issue of high yield, I got an issue of money, I got an issue of chemical exposure, I got an issue of malnutrition. I don't know if there are 4 supporting points or 3 or maybe even a 5th supporting point because, like I said, it feels like some of the ideas just are repeating. On the supporting information, for the first part of the speech, there was just the one quote that you had in the introduction that was kind of a generic introductory quote. After that, I didn't hear any particular evidence. Later on, there were 2 other quotes from authorities on the subject, but again, it's very generic information. You cite examples, but you don't give us any source citation for those examples. You mentioned that China is highly dependent on chemicals. I don't know where you got that from. You mentioned that South Africa and India don't have those same problems, that they basically get the economic benefit. I don't know where that came from. I know you described what's going on with vitamin A and how the golden rice is supposed to address that issue, and I'm sure that that's right out of the manufacturer's handbook as to one of the claims that they make about their particular product. How much malnutrition is it solving? Has it made a difference? Those places where they have access to it, do they have less of the malnutrition that they were talking about before? Those would be ways to illustrate those particular points. So I thought that the evidence was a little inconsistent on that. Like I said, the 3 quotes that you did have were very generic in nature, and they like the last one just says, we need people to be better informed about this and to be more supportive of it without necessarily proving that it has these benefits that you're talking about. I thought you did a pretty good job speaking to the audience, although the pacing sometimes sounds a little bit awkward during the presentation. All right, thank you.